Hello, welcome back to the next video for your Introduction to Philosophy readings. This video will be a sort of roundup video that will cover multiple readings, specifically readings 13, 14, and 15. The Lingus Zagzebski Carrying and Epistemic Commands reading, which is very short, the G.E. Moore Proof of an External World reading, and the Jonathan Vogel Skepticism and Inference Best Explanation reading. Why am I doing all three of these at once? Well, two reasons. First, these readings, first of all, two of them are extremely short. Um, that's sort of a reason zero. Reason one is that all of these readings are sort of on the same exact topic. All of these are rebuttals to skepticism, ways they outline different approaches you can take that will give you a legitimate reason to reject the skeptical hypothesis. We read Descartes, who gave us a pretty convincing explanation of why we can be skeptics, or even maybe should be skeptics. Um, we read Hume, um, who talked about the fact that skepticism kind of isn't banana pants, like it's not out there, like it's there's some pretty convincing things there. Um, and now we're sort of pivoting to these thinkers who are responding to that and who are basically saying, yeah, but here's why you shouldn't be a skeptic still. Okay, so so all three of them are taking different approaches, but basically between the three of them, in theory, one of these should be sufficient for you to reject skepticism. It's not that they all need to work together to achieve sufficiency. It's just that any one of them might individually be sufficient for you to say, yeah, skepticism, I'm cool, but thank you, but no. Okay, so let's just dive right into it, and we'll start by talking briefly. Oh, I gave you one reason. So the second reason is that all of these can be covered fairly quickly because I'm not doing a sort of point by point walkthrough of the readings. What I want to do is I just want to sort of explicate the big idea behind each reading. Um, it won't be enough to go on by itself, but if you pair my explanation with the reading, that should be more than enough to help you understand what's going on with these arguments. So anyway, okay, so let's dive right into it. Let's talk about the Lingus Zagzebski Carrying and Epistemic Demands reading. Okay, so full disclosure, Lingus Zagzebski taught at OU before she retired. I took a couple of classes with her in grad school on epistemology. Delightfully intelligent woman, very weird. I enjoyed my class time with her. I disagree with her on a number of things, but I feel like this is a pretty good argument. Anyway, so what Linda tries to do here is to link the fact that we have goals that we care about, agendas we want to pursue, to whether or not we need knowledge and can have it. So the first step of the argument is linking knowledge sort of in a relationship of necessity. What she wants to say is that if you care about something, like for instance, if there's something you want to do, I want to raise a child, I want to build a house, I want to collect all the first generation transformers, whatever. I don't actually care about Transformers, but I have a friend who won't shut up about them, so I happen to know some of the terminology. Anyway, um, lovely fellow, wonderful friend. I just can't. I don't get the whole Transformers thing. Anyway, um, if you have something you care about that you want to do, Linda argues that knowledge is necessary in order to actualize on your goals. Okay. Now, why isn't true belief enough? Why couldn't I just be able to do the things I want to do with armed only with a bunch of true beliefs? Basically, and this isn't fully explained in the reading I gave you, but basically her position is that there's no way, just statistically, realistically, there's no way that you will, if you are getting true beliefs without justification, then that means you're just sort of getting them haphazardly. You're getting a bunch of beliefs, and some of them happen to be true. Because if you were getting them in a way that provided justified beliefs, the fact that they are true would not be a coincidence. Does that make sense? Um, if I am using a belief generating mechanism that provides justified beliefs, then the fact that it provides justified beliefs is indicative of the fact that my beliefs are more likely than not to be true. And uh, as long as my belief generating mechanism is justified, uh, then I'm probably getting true beliefs. So I'm reliably getting true beliefs. Now, asterisk that assertion that a belief generating mechanism that provides beliefs that are actually justified is more than likely providing true beliefs, that is very specifically tied to a certain theory of justification called reliabilism. And Linga is a reliabilist, so that assertion, that move, like a move in a chessboard, that move makes sense in that context to her. Um, it may not make sense on an internalist perspective of justification, since you can have uh, internally accessible reasons for believing that, for thinking that your belief is true, which do not necessarily uh, line up with objective reality. And so you can have a justified belief that isn't generated by a mechanism that is more likely to give you true beliefs on an internalist perspective, but not on a reliabilist perspective. And Linga is a reliabilist. So we'll be talking more about internalism and externalism, more about reliabilism and things like that. Um, we'll be talking more about that stuff later. But for now, just take my word for it that if you have a certain theory of justification, then on that theory, a justified belief is more likely than not true because it is in fact justified. So, um, taking us back to what I was saying a minute ago, uh, if you were just getting true beliefs that weren't justified, then you're getting them on Linga's view haphazardly. And you're not likely to get, or you wouldn't want to get your beliefs uh, haphazardly if you want to actually get things done. If you want to actually actualize on your agendas, you need beliefs that are more than likely to be true. You need a belief generating mechanism that gives you beliefs more than likely to be true and not just true by chance. So you need knowledge. You need knowledge. You need justified true belief if you want to get shit done. Linga would never use that phrase, but trust me, That's more or less what she means. If you want to get shit done, and you do, that's the first part of her argument. We all want to get things done. If you do, if you care about anything, then you care about having knowledge. Okay, so we've established the link up that if you want to get anything done, you want knowledge. Now, that's not enough right now to reject the skeptical position. Um, Lots of people who think they're being. I mean, Descartes wanted knowledge, but he worried that the evil demon prevented him from getting it. Um, so, that's not enough. So, the first part of the argument is if you want to get shit done, then you want to have knowledge. The next part of the argument is what we call a transcendental argument in philosophy, which means that she's not going to argue that we have knowledge because we care. She's going to argue that the fact that we do accomplish our goals just means that we must have knowledge. Like, I guess we must have it. Here's a good example. Well, maybe not good, but here's an example. If I turn the key for my car and it starts, that means I have gas. Now, the fact that my car started did not cause it did not cause the car to have gas in it. But it is indicative of the fact that it had gas in it. In other words, the car would not have started if it didn't have gas in it. Since it did start, I therefore know the car does have gas in it. So it's not a causal argument. It is a transcendental argument. It's an argument that means that because one thing happened, we know another thing happened or must be true. Because one thing is true, we know that this other thing must be true because the other thing is a necessary precondition for it. So, here we go. So Linda argues in the first part that if you want to get anything done, you must have knowledge. You need knowledge. Knowledge is a necessary precondition for getting things done. And since the next part of it is to point out that we do get things done. We care about stuff, and then we do that stuff. That we actually accomplish things. Therefore, we know that we must know things. Therefore, we know that the skeptical position isn't true. So we reject skepticism on the basis of the fact that we know we have knowledge. I know I have knowledge, therefore skepticism is false. Because skepticism says I can't have knowledge. So if I do have knowledge, skepticism can't be true. So I know I have knowledge, therefore I know skepticism is false, and I know I have knowledge because I know I clearly actually do accomplish goals from time to time. Not many of them. I'm a procrastinator and I'm disorganized, but I do sometimes accomplish things. Therefore I know I have knowledge, therefore I know skepticism is false. Okay. So that's what Linda's going for. Is this an adequate argument to rebut skepticism? Kind of. It assumes that we are actually accomplishing our goals. If we believe we're globally deceived, like with a Cartesian evil demon or being plugged into the Matrix or something, if we think that we are globally deceived, that all this is fake, then maybe we might also believe, or at least suspect, that we are not actually achieving our goals. That we think we are, we think we're getting things done, but everything around us is fake, so none of that's actually happening. And if that's true, then Linda's argument doesn't go through. On the other hand, It's not that Linga's argument is necessarily bad. It's just that she kind of shifts the grounds of discussion. The grounds of discussion is no longer, after she makes this argument, we're no longer arguing about whether we have knowledge. We're arguing about whether we're actually accomplishing anything. Are we actually accomplishing anything? Is basically the question at hand. And it is a little bit circular because it all comes down to, well, are we being deceived or not? Which is just the skeptical question. So using this to rebut the skeptical position might not satisfy everyone. It might be that in order to get the first premise, the premise that we do actually accomplish our goals, we have to assume skepticism isn't true to begin with. I don't know. I don't know. There's another reading that I didn't give you that is applicable here. I'm not going to go into it, but it may be that we can. It may be that there isn't circularity in Linga's argument if we allow that we can be accomplishing our goals and still be in a simulation or globally deceived. That's further into the weeds than I feel like getting. But maybe I'll come back to that in a later video. But for now, we're just gonna set that aside. So that's Linga Zagzebski's carrying and epistemic commands argument against skepticism. I don't know if it's like a super good one, but it's there. It's something, and some people find it sufficient. So we'll just leave it at that. The next argument is going to sound like utter bullshit to you, because it sounds like utter bullshit to everyone. And that's okay. It is actually a much more sophisticated argument than it appears to be on the surface, and I will explain why. So, G.E. Moore's argument against skepticism. His proof of the external world argument. So Moore, if you've done this reading, you know that Moore basically just says, here's how I know skepticism isn't true. I have a hand, I have another hand. If I was a brain in a jar, both of those sentences would be false, but since they are obviously not false, I must not be a brain in the jar, and therefore skepticism is false. Okay. It sounds like he's basically saying skepticism is false because, duh. Which does not sound like the kind of thing that a person who is a professional philosopher, a well-respected professional philosopher, should say. It doesn't sound like that's the kind of thing that a professor at Cambridge should be saying. But he did. Here's why it actually works. It's not circular, although it appears to be circular. It appears to be because the skeptical position says that you can't trust your senses. You don't even know if you really have a body. You might just be a brain in a jar hooked up to a computer that's simulating a full world. So you might not even have hands. That might not even be true. That your belief that you have hands might be false. And what G.E. Moore sounds like he's saying is basically, but I do have hands, therefore, which sounds like not really arguing against the point. It sounds more like just stomping your foot. Like saying, no! But it's not. Here's what he's arguing. He's arguing that he has prima facie evidence for having hands, or you can substitute any other basic observation about the world around you. I have feet. That's a table. There's water in the water bottle. My cats are over there. Uh, anything that any basic observation of the world, he says we have prima facie reasons to think they're true. Prima facie just means on the face of it. That is to say, at first consideration. Um, I'm able to see and feel my hands, therefore I have at least a basic reason to believe I have hands. Okay. What he's offering is that when you have prima facie evidence for something, that's good enough to believe it. You don't need further reasons unless there is legitimate evidence to call it into question, right? Um, Perfect. Let's say I look over out of the corner of my eye, and I think I see a dog over in the corner. I'm like, oh, was that a dog? And Morgan says, honey, we don't own a dog. Well, the first bit, the fact that I thought I saw a dog, is prima facie evidence. It's prima facie reason to believe that there was a dog, right? It is thinking you see a dog is a basic reason to believe that there is a dog there. Looking around thinking you see a tree is a basic reason to believe that there is a tree. It is only when Morgan calls into question, when Morgan points out we don't own a dog, that I now have reason, a positive reason, to question my initial observation. Okay? Suddenly I'm like, oh, maybe I didn't see a dog, right? I now have a good reason to question it. Um, and what G. Moore is arguing is that the skeptical position does not amount to offering a positive reason to question our prima facie observations. In other words, what he's saying is that the skeptic, the person who says, well, what if all this is, what if this isn't real? They aren't offering you any positive reasons to think it isn't real. They're asking the question, what if it isn't real? They're saying, if none of this is real, then you don't have knowledge. And Moore is saying, yeah, but you haven't given me any reason to think that it might not be real. You've raised a troubling point, right? I'm not disagreeing with you. If all of this was fake, if it was all an illusion, if I'm being globally deceived, then sure, I wouldn't have knowledge. Agreed. But right now, that's just a what if. Right now, that's not there. There's no compelling reason to think that might be the case. Um, it's just a thought experiment at this point. And a thought experiment like that isn't enough to raise doubts that would require us to reconsider our initial observation. Um, Imagine, let's use a slightly different case of the dog example. Imagine uh, I think I see a dog. Morgan and I are out taking a walk, which is something we're planning on doing. We thought it might be nice, low impact exercise. And it'll be pleasant while the weather's nice. Don't know why you need to know that, just felt like telling you. Um, but imagine Morgan and I are out taking a walk, and I thought I saw a dog. I'm like, I thought I saw a dog. I say, I thought I saw a dog over there. And Morgan says, maybe it was a big cat. And I could say, yeah, maybe it was. But all Morgan has offered is a possibility. Morgan hasn't offered a reason to question my initial observation. So I'm still perfectly rational if I believe that I saw a dog, if I believe there was a dog there. Now, let's compare a separate case. Morgan and I are out taking a walk. There's movement. We both look that direction. I say, I think there was a dog over there. Like prima facie, I have prima facie evidence that there was a dog over there because I thought I saw one. And Morgan says, I thought it was a cat. Well, now I have another observation. I have someone else who is a competent observer who thought they saw something different than I saw. Now I have enough reason to question my initial premise. I have enough reason to question my initial prima facie evidence. And maybe at that point I have to reserve judgment. I have my observation that there was a dog counterpoised against Morgan's observation that there was a cat, and we don't know which is true because we have no further evidence to decide between those two, and we have to just go, I don't know, one or the other, I guess, and that's that. So Moore is arguing that your basic observations of the world around you are prima facie evidence, that is sufficient evidence, to believe that the things that you observe really exist, unless or until further evidence is presented that might make you question whether you're really seeing what you think you're seeing. You can go ahead and believe that. Bear in mind, this is an argument from rationality. It's not an argument that we are not being deceived. This is not a dispositive argument. It's not saying we are definitely not being deceived. It's saying that it is rational to believe you are not being deceived. Unless further evidence can be adduced that this is a matrix situation or a brain in the jar situation or an evil gaming situation, unless further evidence for one of those cases can be presented, as long as all the skeptic has is a bunch of questions, well, what if? As long as all the skeptic can bring to the table is what if, then I am allowed, I am rational if I believe that it is not a deception, that the world is as I observe it, pretty much as I observe it. Okay. So, Linda's argument was an argument that since we do have knowledge, skepticism can't be true. That's a dispositive argument that says the skeptic is wrong. G.E. Moore's argument is just an argument that says the skeptic ain't got nothing. I'm allowed to continue believing that I live in the real world and that everything is basically as I see it. And if the skeptic wants me to entertain his wacky ideas, he needs to bring some more evidence to the table. Okay, so we first have a transcendental argument that the skepticism is wrong, and then we have an argument that skepticism is, or that anti-skepticism is rational. It's not an argument that the skeptic is necessarily wrong. It's just an argument that it's not irrational to believe the skeptic is wrong. Okay. Third reading. This is the Jonathan Vogel reading about inference to best explanation. This one is simple, but the concepts used are a little tricky. So there's a concept in reasoning called Occam's razor. Often spelled O-C-C-A-M apostrophe S, Occam's, it's possessive. Occam is a guy. Occam's razor. You sometimes see Occam spelled O-C-K-H-A-M. William of Occam was a medieval philosopher and theologian, and because it's medieval, they spelled his name in a variety of ways. So both of those are correct. OCCAM is how I first encountered it, so that's how I think of it in my head. But you can look it up under either one. OCCAM, Occam's razor, or Occam's razor, OCKHAM, Occam. Occam's razor is, it says that between any two beliefs, it is more rational to believe the one that is simpler, the one that requires the fewest additional assumptions. Let me unpack that. Um, imagine, imagine you live in a house with a child who is both known to be clumsy and greedy for cookies. And you come into the kitchen and you see a smashed cookie jar and a child, or smashed cookie jar and all the cookies are missing. The most reasonable thing to believe is that the child broke the cookie jar and and took all the cookies. That requires fewer additional assumptions because you already know, you already believe all the things required to make that explanation work. You already know that you live in the house with a kid. You already know that kid is clumsy. You already know that kid likes cookies. Um, you don't have to buy into anything else. But let's imagine that when you question the child says, it was the craziest thing. I was asleep on the couch. A gang of cookie thieves broke in without messing up the lock or the door. They broke in. They went into the kitchen. They smashed the cookie jar because they're angry. They took all the cookies. They left the house quietly without making any noise. They didn't wake me up. Um, they were able to close and relock the door somehow, leaving no evidence of their passage, and that's what happened. Now, you already have the beliefs that you live in the house of the child is clumsy, and the child likes cookies. You already have those beliefs. In order to buy the child's explanation, you then must also take on board the beliefs that such a thing as cookie gangs exist, that one was in your neighborhood, that they came into your house without breaking the lock or the door, that they broke the jar, that they took all the cookies, that they exited the house without waking the child, and that they relocked the door somehow. You have to take on all those additional beliefs in order for the child's story to be plausible. You weren't there. You didn't see anything. You have no proof either way. There's no there's no absolute proof that either one happened. But a reasonable person would believe that the kid did it. And the reason why a reasonable person would believe that the kid did it is because that requires fewer additional beliefs. It is the simpler explanation, in other words. Uh, the reasons for this have to do with multiplicative probability, and we don't need to get into all that. The only thing that needs to be said there is that when you add a new conjunction to a belief, to a claim, it gets less likely. Like, for instance, think about the probability that, let's imagine that the probability that you are wearing shoes and not sandals. The probability that you are wearing shoes and not sandals is 80%. Okay. And let's separately imagine that the probability that you have a tattoo on your face is 1%. So the if I say, what's the probability that you're wearing sandals? That's 80%. If I say, what is the probability that you are wearing sandals and have a tattoo on your face? That's 80% times 1%. That's the way the math on that logic works, the way probabilities work. In order for the probability of two separate things happening, it is the or for both of them to be true, it is the probability of one event times the probability of the other event. So as you can see, the probability one of those events is very likely that you're wearing shoes and not sandals, and one of those events is very unlikely that you have a tattoo on your face. But the probability of both of them being true at once is sort of, it's less likely than either of them individually. So that's the reason Occam's razor works. It is more reasonable, it is more likely that the simpler explanation, the one that requires believing fewer things, it is more likely that the simpler explanation is true. Does this mean that the simpler explanation is always true? No. It means that it is more reasonable to believe the simpler explanation. Sometimes life is weird. Sometimes improbable things happen. Sometimes the more complex explanation is the truth. There was this guy, this naval officer, back in the 60s, who believed that he was being followed everywhere he went, that people were following him, and that he was the target of a conspiracy to attack his telephones and all this stuff. And he went to doctors about it, and the doctors are like, look, you've been under a lot of stress. I think you're probably just cracking up. And they gave him medication and whatnot. Anyway, that is the more likely explanation. It was far more likely that this was a delusion, a paranoid delusion, than that he was really a target of some vast conspiracy. And you can see where this is going. It turns out he was a target of a conspiracy. He had attracted the attention of the CIA, and they were doing internal operations against Americans back in the 60s. And he really was being followed, and his phones are being tapped, and his documents are being tampered with, and all that stuff. So it was really true, even though it was the less probable explanation. Sometimes the world is weird. Sometimes the less probable thing turns out to be true. What Occam's razor says is that given all evidence being equal, all things being equal, it is more reasonable to believe the simpler explanation. In other words, it says that's where smart money goes. In other words, it says that's where a rational person would stake his claim. They would say, rationally, it's probably the simpler explanation. A rational belief can turn out to be false. Because, like I said, things can be weird. Who knows what can happen? Okay. What does all this have to do with inference to best explanation? Okay. It's kind of like, it's related to, but not identical with the G.E. Moore thing. As Vogel says in the paper, what this means is that if we imagine the hands thing again. I think I see that I have hands. I believe I am seeing and feeling that I have hands, so I conclude I have hands. That's one possible conclusion. The other possible explanation for why I think I see and feel that I have hands is that I'm a brain in a jar and there's a computer hooked up to the brain in the jar and it's running a vast simulation that makes me think I have hands, which is the simpler explanation, which requires you to believe less stuff. If I think I see, if I go, I see that I have hands, therefore I believe the explanation for that, the explanation for the fact that I see that I have hands is that I have hands. See, it took one fact, it took one thing to explain my belief that I'm seeing that I have hands. The skeptical position, the brain in the jar position, says, I see that I have hands. The explanation for that is that I don't have hands. I'm a brain in a jar, but someone has put my brain in that jar. Someone has programmed a computer to make me think I have hands and hooked my brain up to that computer. And the computer has been working continuously for my entire life. And it's very sophisticated and it simulates a whole world. And whoever built it must be a super genius. They have infinite resources, blah, 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 blah. Uh, Obviously, that one requires a ton of other beliefs. I have to believe all those things to explain why I see a hand. And the other option is to believe the reason I see a hand is just that I have a friggin' hand. So basically, what Vogel is saying is that the anti-skeptical position, the position that the world is basically the way that we observe it to be, is far simpler. It is the best explanation for our observations. It is the best explanation for what we observe. Now, bear in mind that sometimes this will bite you in the ass. The inference to the best explanation here is it says that it's more rational to be an anti-skeptic, to take an anti-skeptical position. It's more rational to believe skepticism is false, but sometimes taking the simplest explanation, taking the stance that the best explanation of why the world appears the way it does is that it is how it appears, that won't always work out for you. And the best example of that is thinking about the fact that the Earth orbits the Sun and not vice versa. It looks like the Sun orbits the Earth. It really does. It does not look like the Earth orbits the Sun. It looks like the Sun orbits the Earth. And that is why, for many thousands of years, people believed that the Sun orbits the Earth. Because that's how it looks. They were proceeding from the assumption that the best explanation for the way that the world looks is that that's the way the world is. Why does the world look this way? Because that's the way it is. That is the inference to best explanation at work, but that time it's delivering a false belief. It turns out that as we got more information, as we made further observations, suddenly the best explanation was not. The best explanation for why it looked like the Sun orbits the Earth turns out to be very complicated. And that sucks. Sometimes the world is like that. Sometimes Occam's razor is not going to get you where you need to go. But it does mean even when Occam's razor leads us to false beliefs, we're still rational for holding those beliefs. Given the amount of evidence the people in the olden days had, it was perfectly rational to believe that the sun orbited the Earth. They were not being stupid. They were not being ignorant or naive. They were working from the best explanation for their observations. And it really was the best explanation for their observations because they did not have sufficient observations to establish anything counter to that. Okay, so we have Lenga's position that skepticism is wrong. We have G. Moore's position that it is most rational to reject the skeptical hypothesis, and Vogel's position that is basically the same but with different reasoning, that it is most rational to reject the skeptical hypothesis while keeping in mind that sometimes the most rational the most rational belief will not turn out to be the correct belief. Okay. So, three readings that all have different rebuttals of skepticism, of why either you shouldn't be a skeptic or why it's okay to ignore the skeptics, or why skepticism just doesn't really get us where we need to go. It doesn't hold any water. It's not. It's not the best move to make. Okay. All right. Hopefully that was helpful to you. Again, I did not go into super detail on these because you have the readings and you should be doing the readings. And anyway, and that will help you. So I will be back next time on the next episode. We'll talk about internalism and externalism, which I know you'll just love. All right, take care. Bye.